Employers of Reddit, what is the most inappropriate piece of clothing someone has worn to a job interview? Story 1. A few years back, I had someone show up fresh out of the swimming pool. Hair wet, bathing suit, and cover-up on. Still wet. Hadn't taken the time to dry off. I went through the interview and a test simulation of the job with her. She actually did very well in the simulation. When I took her to see my boss, that made the ultimate decision. He took one look and said no. Didn't ask about the simulation or anything. Just no. It was for a small textile company that manufactures clean room supplies. Also, the boss was a complete I have numerous stories about why he did and didn't hire someone after I did the initial interview and assessment. Story 2. A pair of flesh-colored leggings that made her look as if she wasn't wearing pants at all, a sweatshirt that opened in the front that had been pulled out to the side a bit to reveal a lacy camisole top. We work as therapists. No fucking way she got that job. Both her wig and glasses were askew. There was an odor somewhere between human and cat urine, and about halfway through, she asked if she could take a break because she left her car running to charge her phone. Story 3. I worked in the U.S. Senate a couple of years back. We interviewed about half a dozen candidates for a pretty junior position. One of the interviewees was wearing a Harvard t-shirt, a Harvard jacket, and Harvard sweatpants. We were astounded. The first question my coworker asked was, "Did you go to Harvard?" The guy did, and he handled the rest of the interview surprisingly well. He didn't get the job, but he did become a running joke in the office for a while. Story 4. Back when I was an hourly manager at Walmart, a guy came in with greasy hair, a white t-shirt full of holes, and sweatpants. And to top it all off, he looked like he had a semi. Surprisingly, he didn't smell, and the clothes actually looked clean, so that was good. But still, I gave him a hard no, but the overnight assistant gave him the go. Because he wasn't going to be on her shift and she thought it was hilarious. This guy was a nightmare. Wore that same outfit, now never washed, almost daily. Smelled like death, ass, and cumin, and he was crazy. We were finally able to fire him after he pulled out his pocket knife and cut his coworker. Thankfully, the cut didn't cause any real damage to the kid, but seriously, what the fuck? Story 5. I worked with a guy who applied to the local big city fire department. Apparently, all candidates had to submit a passport-type photo of themselves, although I failed to see how that's relevant. Diversity quota, perhaps? Anyway, this guy was a gym nut and also sent a full head and torso photo of himself with no shirt on. When I asked him why, he replied, "So they know I'm not a twink." Well, it must have worked, as Twinkie is now a firefighter. Story 6. Sometime around 3 years ago, I was having dinner in a restaurant and saw a young woman come up to the counter and ask for a job application. The employees gave her one and she sat down near me to fill it out. This is when I noticed she was wearing a cap with a huge pot leaf on it. She finished it, returned it to the counter, and asked what the follow-up would be. The employee said, "We'll contact you in a few days for an interview, and when you come back, don't wear that hat." Story 7. Ooh boy, the guy without pants. At my last job, I spent around 10 months in 2017 on a research team doing statistical learning research for health informatics. It's a very large healthcare company, and they basically took almost a dozen of their PhD researchers from business intelligence, R&D, research and development, and market development, and temporarily reassigned them to the new Center for Data Excellence. 2 of the PhDs were director AVP level, so they each got to bring a team member with them. My director brought me from market development because of my background in mathematical modeling, but the other guy didn't have anyone in his department who was free enough to bring along, so they posted the job and started interviewing. I do the pre-interview stuff with one of the junior PhDs and then the senior team members who come in. Anyway, 4 days into interviewing, we got one dude up on Skype for his interview, and he's way too close to the screen, like his laptop's up on his knees. We asked him to move the laptop back a bit, and he gives it up that he can't because the lower part of his shirt has a huge fresh coffee stain and his pants are hanging on the adjacent wall. He'd lost track of time and rushed home, and he'd spilled his coffee in his hurry. We told him, "No problem, we'll find a new time for you. The shirt might be a goner, but be sure to wash the pants in hot water right away." We actually hired that dude, and I think he's still there. Great guy. Story 8. This guy was coming in to interview for a financial advisor program. Everyone in our office dresses pretty professionally, and most people I interview are dressed in their best suits. This gentleman comes in wearing a stained white dress shirt with a yellow tinted white undershirt. I forget what kind of pants, but he had a cloth Joker belt. "Why so serious?" written all over it with the Joker's face, neon green and black, that he didn't loop through the rest of his pants and was swaying around when walking. He also had very long, creepy fingernails that were very dirty, and he kept rolling and rubbing his fingers together to get the dirt off subconsciously. The icing on the cake was he coughed and snorted something up very loudly, then swallowed it, then loudly commented, "Nice." Somehow this guy aced our assessments and put together a great resume, but was just the exact opposite of professional. We are still not sure if he was trying to f with us or was that terribly oblivious. I just assumed he was interviewing for someone else, like Ben Affleck in Good Will Hunting. Story 9. Not an employer, but I recently watched this train wreck happen. My boyfriend's second job just hired several new people. My boyfriend and I were hanging out at his place of work after his shift was over, and we had the pleasure of witnessing an interview. Please note that this is a pretty casual place. All of the workers there wear jeans and gym shoes or boots to work. Their uniform is a t-shirt with a company logo, although sometimes the workers come in wearing different, occasionally nicer tops depending on if there's an event there or something. So the interviewee shows up wearing the tiniest, tightest, sparkliest party dress I've ever seen in my life. It barely covered her nipple. Her entire braless back was exposed, and when she sat down on the chair for her interview, her whole bare ass hit the chair because the dress could not physically stay over her bottom while sitting. She was also wearing 6-inch heels. No offense meant towards prostitutes, truly, seeing as how my best friend was one for a bit, but she honestly to God looked like she had just walked in from the street corner. The only place that outfit would have been appropriate was in a bedroom. Really, I cannot stress enough just how little clothing this lady was wearing. It was truly one of those situations where you knew you weren't supposed to stare, but you just couldn't look away. There were customers there at the time as well, and nearly all of them were staring at her in shock, the exception being a couple of men who were there with their wives. Those men were staring straight forward, wide-eyed, not daring to move their heads an inch lest their wives think they were looking. Like it was a spectacle. Anyway, so the next day, my boyfriend finds out that they actually hired her. Apparently, the skeevy old owner of the place liked her resume after all. Hopefully, she remembers to wear pants, or at least underwear, when she starts. Story 10. I worked in a phone shop, salesman, and we had an open day hiring event where anyone could walk in and be interviewed. We were always desperate for staff because the turnover was insane due to the job being sold as a dream and being more of a nightmare. Most people showing up were in smart casual. What would you expect for an interview? But one guy had some real guts. From bottom to top, it went ripped jeans, Che Guevara top, 2 sweatbands on his wrists, and the creme de la creme, a snapback cap with the phrase, "Fuck what you think," printed right on it. What possessed this guy to think it was a good idea to wear a hat that literally calls out the interviewer's opinion of them? I will never really know. All I do know, though, is that out of the 50 or so odd interviewees, this guy was miles above the rest in terms of how well he interviewed. As you'd imagine, he didn't get offered the job for purely his clothing, proving that you should always at least make an effort. And don't wear a hat cussing the interviewer. Story 11. For a design engineer position, this person shows up in a see-through purple sleeveless midriff shirt, leopard print bra that could be clearly seen through the shirt, white spandex type pants that you could also clearly see matching leopard print panties, and sandals. HR did their thing and passed her on to me to do the skills assessment test, 6 mathematics, 6 logic questions, and then a CAD computer-aided design drawing that she was to reproduce in Solid Edge. Her CV shows 4 years of experience. I gave her 1 hour to do the stuff, got distracted and gave her almost an hour and a half, returned her to HR and checked what she had done. Fuck me, this woman got 0 of the questions right and had a few lines drawn, but that was it. Not even a finished sketch to do a protrusion. So fail across the board. I see the HR person walk the woman out and come to my office on her way back to her office. She said something like, not sure what she thought she was applying for, but it sure isn't prostitution. Did she do well on the tests at least? Nope, 0%. This woman's CV showed a BS Bachelor of Science in Mechanical Engineering and 8 years of experience as a design engineer in the OG industry. Well, it must be BS for bull. Story 12. I interviewed a candidate about a year ago who showed up in the standard suit, tie, and stormtrooper helmet. We asked the obvious question and he said he knew we were interviewing a number of candidates and statistically, he knew his chances of getting the job were slim, so he figured he'd at least be memorable. He actually interviewed really well. It helped that I and the other manager are pretty big Star Wars fans and he really knew his stuff. He didn't get the job, but we sure as hell remembered him, and about 2 months later, we had an opening that he would have been a good fit for. If he'd interviewed for it, he probably would have gotten it, but he'd already found a new role with a competitor. Story 13. I was on the other end, I guess. I always presumed that you were to dress your best when it came to interviews. So when I went to a large group interview for the local amusement park as a teen, I wore my go-to interview outfit. Casual dress, a cardigan sweater, and sensible flats. I walk inside and there was just a mass of teens wearing sweatpants, yoga pants, sweatshirts, short shorts, spaghetti strap tank tops, and so forth. I was so out of place and the other teens were making fun of me. A boy tried to flip up my dress. I left crying because when it came to narrowing it down on who to hire, I was told I was unqualified. The interview said quite loudly to the next girl that I was too fat and prudish to work at an amusement park. I weighed 160 pounds and my dress went to my knees. I hardly thought it was prudish. Looking back, I don't know why I was crying over it. I guess I was just really sensitive. Story 14. I was working retail at a clothing store. The dude is driving a super loud motorcycle, pulls up onto the sidewalk, and parks directly in front of the entrance, essentially blocking both doors. He strolls inside without taking his helmet off, walks right up to the counter and pulls a crudely rolled up application out of his jacket and hands it to me, still rolled up. Please take off your full face motorcycle helmet before trying to apply for a job. Story 15. This one was me. Just moved across the country and needed a job. Had spent the last 4 years as a cook and had a pretty good letter of recommendation from my old boss. Applied for a handful of kitchen work and got 2 callbacks the same day, both wanting to set up interviews for the following day. The next day, I realized I hadn't really packed anything too professional, mainly just shorts, t-shirts, and tank tops. I moved from Tasmania to Darwin, and I thought, fuck it, and ended up wearing track pants and a t-shirt as well as Converse to the interviews. I ended up being offered both jobs. Story 16. I had a candidate come to an interview 20 minutes late, which was surprising because one of my staff saw her sitting in her car talking on the phone before her interview started. Okay, she was wearing the tightest green dress that maybe hit mid-thigh on the lower end and more boot out of the dress than in on the upper end. She literally bounced up and down in high heels as she came through the door. With a deep breath, I introduced myself and extended a handshake, but she grabbed my hand and pulled herself in for a hug. I normally did interviews solo, but in this case, I asked one of my female staff to join me and I left my office door open. One of her opening lines was, "Excuse me for being so forward, but I went to Liberty University and we are huggers." Okay, you went to Liberty and are dressed and act like that? Yeah, she got a 10-minute interview and my staff member let her out. She actually called about it 3 days later, asking if she got the job. Story 17. Had a guy show up for an entry-level position at an aircraft maintenance company in full linen suit, alligator skin shoes, and leather gloves in the South Florida heat. We explained to him over the phone when setting up the interview that there would be a hands-on portion and expect to get dirty. The interview went well. He answered the questions as we expected. Then we asked him to help us with an oil change and he freaked out about the suit. I decided to give him a chance and go home to change and come back. He agreed. He came back the next day wearing nice slacks and a baby blue lacrosse polo shirt. I explained again that he will be getting dirty today and he said that what he was wearing were his work clothes. He got dirty and never came back. Still wonder why he decided to wear a suit that cost more than he would make in a month. Story 18. When I was 15, I applied for a job at my local supermarket. I just handed in an application on my way home from school. The manager had me take a basic math test, which I passed easily, then told me to come in on Saturday for an interview and training. He told me how to dress. Black trousers, black shoes, and a white shirt. It wasn't clear to me for some reason if I actually got the job, so I didn't want to ask my mother to buy those clothes without knowing there was a point to it, so instead I just wore my quote-unquote best clothes. My best pair of jeans, a black dress shirt, and some new casual shoes, a pair of blue Skechers with chunky white soles. So the manager takes one look at me and says I obviously had problems following simple directions, but still took me through the training shift and told me to make sure I had an appropriate attire before my first real shift. Story 19. Had a guy applying for a position as a supervisor. He came in dressed in swim shorts and a floral button-up shirt and sunglasses. He got the job. Another one is a man applying for work in a government office administration who went into his interview in torn jeans, a dirty white t-shirt, messy hair, sandals, and thick facial hair. He was turned down until his friend who works there hadn't come back for another interview and he got the job. He's been screwing people over ever since. Dumber than a brick, too. Story 20. I manage a men's salon. We wear a uniform, but I still fully expect any interviewee to come in decent clothes. I don't love when they wear jeans, but if they aren't dirty and everything else is nice, like a good shirt or a cardigan, I'm fine. If they choose not to wear makeup, that's also fine, but I do expect cleanliness. I personally came to my interview in a pencil skirt, button-up shirt and heels, business casual. I had a woman show up as she had literally rolled out of bed with no makeup, hair in a ratty bun, dirty tank top and sweatpants, and nasty flip-flops. She also brought her middle child out of 6. It had already been hard enough to nail down a date she could manage to make it in for an interview. I had already half decided that she wouldn't be a good fit because of that. I thought maybe she was just having an off week, so I bought them a drink at Starbucks and offered a day to redo the interview without the child, and she pulled the same, "Oh, I have a doctor's appointment that day and the baby has an appointment this other day." I definitely did not hire her. She clearly didn't want a job. Story 21. 20 years ago, I was an assistant pastor at an evangelical church. We were interviewing bus drivers who would mainly be transporting kids and elderly people. This young guy showed up with great recommendations. It was early morning and he looked like he was still groggy. He had a lot of tattoos. Okay, so what? But the one tattoo that stood out was this huge phrase, "tip and act," emblazoned on his neck, under his chin, wrapping from one side to the other. The pastor asked him about it, and the man seemed horrified. He said he always covers it with makeup, but woke up and forgot to on this day. After the interview, the pastor said to the interview panel, "We've interviewed a few good candidates, but I think this guy wins by a neck," then hired him. I'm not evangelical or even Christian today, but that response was pretty cool in my book. Story 22. I worked for a nightclub and this guy came in for a bartender interview wearing a fireman's outfit. Worst interview ever. The whole time, he kept pointing out fire hazards and telling me that he was going to report us to the fire chief. When I asked him why he wanted the job, he kept pretending like he didn't want it and was only there because a group of people had gotten third-degree burns the night before, and he was there to investigate. I didn't give him the job, of course, and considered telling him to dress for the job he wants next time as advice, but I kept my mouth shut since his attitude had been so bad. Some people are just clueless. Story 23. I was interviewing a new guy for a job at one point. The actual interview couldn't be bothered. So the guy comes in. The shirt is a mess with what I thought were paint stains or something. Nope. It was blood and mustard. He smelled like beer and booze. He was unshaven, which is fine, but he didn't care about his beard. That thing was ragged, filled with spit, dirt, and whatever else. He was wearing his high school graduation t-shirt and constantly playing with his class ring. He came in wearing black socks and black sandals, hoping he would look somewhat professional. He was wearing unwashed sweatpants. I didn't realize it at first, but I knew the guy. He was from my high school. He didn't recognize me though, because when I was going through questions, he brought up a lot of stuff he did in high school and tried to play it off as major achievements. It would be nice, but we graduated well over 10 years ago. Hell, I remember him posting random Facebook pictures at the class reunion that I refused to attend. When I got to the stereotypical questions such as how do you determine success and where do you see yourself in 5 years, determining success is power over others. He also used this time to badmouth everyone in our graduating class, including me. He told me he saw himself as CEO of the company and making things right. I just told him that will be all, and before he left, he said, "So, when do I start?" I just told him, "I'll be discussing that later. Also, other applicants are still with the other interviewers," and he said that I can wait. I told him, "We'll call," and he said there was no need. After about 30 minutes, he took the hint and left, whistling and catcalling the secretary on his way out. The guy doing the interview was shocked at everything and convinced I made it up until he requested to see security footage of the guy leaving the room. I saw him mouth a "what the hell" before just shaking his head. The guy came in a few more times asking when is he going to start working for us. The secretary tells him the position has been filled and that there were no more openings available. He didn't like this and had to be escorted out.